All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this broadcast. On today's discussion, we're going to talk about the decision of offering a non-safe for work or risque variant cover to your next comic book Kickstarter launch. Now, offering variant covers has kind of become the norm for comic book Kickstarter campaigns for a while now, but I've been seeing, and I think some other folks have been seeing, that more and more campaigns are offering sort of the naughty covers on Kickstarter campaigns. And so on this session, I have two creators that have experimented with that space, and we're gonna talk about that. So I'm excited to introduce my guests, who longtime Comics Launch listeners should know and recognize as some of our favorite guests again. So once again, joining me here for this discussion is Rob Multari. He's the publisher and founder of Lone Wolf Comics. He's the writer of the supernatural horror series Night Wolf and Snowpaw, which are both being successfully serialized on the Kickstarter platform. And he's also a full-time web and graphic designer. So welcome, Rob. And we also, in addition to Rob here, have Charlie Stickney, who is a writer and producer with over 20 years of experience working for some of the biggest companies in TV and animation and film, music videos. And he's also a very successful comic book writer now. He does the series White Ash from Scout Comics, as well as Glarien and a number of other really cool projects. And now, in just a few short years, is the veteran of 10 very successful Kickstarter campaigns. And so I'm excited to have you both here, taking a little bit of time away from work and family and Kickstarter launches that you have going on to talk comics, Kickstarter, crowdfunding, and non-safe for work covers. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. All right, so before we dive into this topic, I do want to just check in with each of you because you have big Kickstarter campaigns going on. Rob, you are back at it with your latest, which is the latest Night Wolf installment. And I'm curious, as someone who has been working on the Night Wolf series for a while now, and then did your first spinoff for Snowpaw, which launched, I believe, last November. Now you have two series going on sort of simultaneously. How has that juggling of multiple series been going and for you?
Yeah, so definitely there isn't a dull moment. It's nonstop, which I kind of like that. I think the sitting back and waiting for things kind of makes me crazy. I always have to have something to do. But yeah, no. So it's definitely being a creator in itself is a full-time job on top of family and full-time job. So I just decided to add more to it. But it's been actually going quite well. I kind of got it to like where I can rotate them. So like when I'm in the middle of like Kickstarting with Night Wolf, like I am now, tomorrow I have a meeting with Mog to start on issue 2 of Snowpaw. So she's going to start getting into that. And then by the time this campaign ends and is funded and then hopefully fulfilled, in July, keeping the fingers crossed as long as, all things go according to plan. She should be pretty much done. And Bruna, I'm hoping to have her pretty much either started or be well underway so we can have a summer launch for Snowpaw. So, being able to rotate those all at the same time, doing the different parts, I think it will help streamline as well as keep things going and keeping things interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And Charlie, excited to see White Ash is back on Kickstarter. I'm curious, just for you, you're sort of playing the challenging, often game of balancing and communicating. What goes through Kickstarter, what goes through Scout and the direct market, communicating the offer that you're putting out to Kickstarter backers and everything. So this White Ash Deluxe Edition, just for those folks that might be, a little just confused about, okay, hey, what exactly is your approach here now, and what's this latest book here on Kickstarter? What can you tell us?
Well, first of all, it is confusing. Let's just like get that out, you know. I made it even more confusing by having different numbering through Kickstarter than I did through the direct market, because
Mm,
the issues were different sizes. So there's actually a section in the campaign where I'm trying to break down what everything is and how they correlate with a. I do that in the video and also in the pictograph. Yeah, there you go, reading order,
there we
where
go.
I sort
Yep.
of say, if you're coming from Scout, this is where you should be now. If you're coming from, you know, Kickstarter, this is where we are. And
Yeah.
you know, I think, like, as someone who goes back and forth also, Tyler, through the direct market, you know, the economics of both places. And you know, what I'm trying to do through Kickstarter is to continue to build a world there and make sure that when we make this book, everyone who works on it is paid a real wage. You know, that, you know, they don't have to be working 50, 60 hours a week and getting back $300, which is really the realities of the direct market. Sometimes it doesn't support the creation of comic books once you
Mhm.
get past a certain level. And so then, as a creator, you have two choices. One is you go deeply into debt to make these comics and hope, you know, down the road through multiple printings and sellings, you'll make that money back, or you find an additional revenue stream. And so for me, that's always been, you know, part of the plan, was to try to go back and forth between both places and offer something that's a little different in each platform, and realize that they are two different audiences. And so when I'm on Kickstarter, I'm trying to speak to my Kickstarter base. When I'm tweeting, though, I try to be very specific, like, this is a Kickstarter, this is where you should come in. But it is a complicated, you know, process, and I am trying to clarify that, and it's something in the back of my mind going forward, trying to figure out the best way to communicate.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, this is something that I've just been sort of dealing with some of our series and our like the most recent series that we launched for both Kickstarter and the direct
Right,
market is Dig, which launched
right.
in Kickstarter a few months ago, and we just sent out the digital rewards, and our it'll be out in comic shops in May, and our backers will hopefully get it a week or two early. But the difference between it's like we will move in terms of total number of copies probably 4 times as many copies through the direct market and through Diamond as we did on Kickstarter in terms of total volume of the books. But we're going to end up raising probably 6 to 7 or 8 times more funding on the Kickstarter platform than the direct market, given margins and other things like that. And so when they work together, it makes it like it's better for both. But just trying to make it work with with just the direct market can be pretty tough. So I think we are in a blessed space where we do still have the Kickstarter platform out there that continues to thrive for these series, and especially both you and Rob are great examples of creators that have, by really focusing in on a core series and continuing to come back to the platform, it continues to grow and backers continue to return. And so, congrats to both of you for your continued success on the platform.
Thank you.
What I want to, but what I'm, looking forward to chatting with you all is the specific topic is a topic that I haven't really covered on the podcast. I don't think ever, or just, sort of briefly here and there. But this is really the topic of a trend that we're seeing, but something that's been around for a long time. But that's the non-safe for work cover, the risque cover. Essentially, by that I mean covers with nudity. And this is a sexy topic, and so I really can think of no three gentlemen more prepared to talk about this than the heartthrobs that the three of us are. But you know one of the things that I really do say on this podcast a lot, and try to beat into the creators that I work with and coach, is that every launch is an opportunity to try some new stuff, to learn some new things, and that testing is really a key to growing. And so I'm really excited, just the fact that you guys are out there trying new things, testing new things, because everyone gets to learn from that. But I guess I want to start with with Rob, because I'm interested in, like, you know, what was it that had you curious about adding a non-safe for work cover to your, you know, already successful sort of Nightwolf product launches? Were there any campaigns or creators in particular that you were paying attention to, and like what sort of piqued your interest to try this?
Right on. Yeah. So, you know, I've seen the other campaigns out there and people who like want to cross promote. You know, they often like, you know, will approach you or vice versa, you know, and you see like the covers that they have. And some of them are like those double covers that like they're, you know, it's one that has clothing and the other one that doesn't. And then you kind of wonder like, well, how well do those do? And then, you know, I've been kind of mulling it over for like a long time. I mean, I remember bringing it up like during a mastermind, one time, a couple like maybe a year or two ago, and you know, just being like, no, I don't think that's for me. Um, but not to say that like my book isn't, you know, it's like Nightwolf is a little bit more, it's horror and like adult NC-17 issue will, if you will. Not because of like nudity or anything within the book, but I mean, you know, because of the little bit of the gore and action that's in it. But it does cater to having, you know, that kind of a cover to go along with it. So it's always been like in my mind, kind of thinking about, okay, well, it's possible. You know, usually in my mind, like I'm like, well, I don't want to have to rely on that to be like my thing. You know, like I don't want my book being sold because of that, you know what I mean? I wanted to be able to stand on my own with the story and the art as it was. And so, you know, fast forward to, you know, I'm friends with Ron Z, who does Mount Olympus comics, and he does a lot of those campaigns that are very like, you know, that has a ton of those covers, you know what I mean? And so he's had like a really huge success doing them, and you know, I keep him like, you know, on my phone watching his campaigns is like just shoot up, shoot up, shoot up. And I'm like showing my wife, I'm like, you know, can you believe this? I'm like, that's crazy. And she's like, you know, like her and I were both like, you know, no, we shouldn't do this. And so like a couple, I think this was his last campaign, the Samurai Oz, I believe it was 3. I finally, like my wife was like, yeah, you probably should try it out to see how it goes. And I looked at her like, what?
She checked your credit card bill and was like, you know what?
I'm like, yeah, I'm like, is something wrong here? Like, did you get like somebody swap you out, like invasion of body snatchers or something?
Yeah.
So like,
yeah, I want to jump into and talk a little bit about these concerns and getting your wife on board. But I did want to sort of also just check in with Charlie on this. And so, can you, like, what was the first campaign that you sort of experimented with this kind of covers?
So, you know, I don't know if I've you know, let's I think there's a lot of things, you know, that about this topic. I think one of the, you know, the old saying is you can't judge a book by a cover, but you can certainly sell a book by its cover, right? You
Absolutely.
know, and so for me, it's always about, you know, what are you trying to do? You know, are you like, I don't, you know, want to cast aspersions on any other campaigns, but there are definitely people who are just looking to make money on Kickstarter, right? And so the goal for those people is, you know, what will raise me the most amount of money possible? And they don't really care about the content of books. You know, they're looking to see what will sell. I think, you know, Rob and I are in very different places because, you know, what comes first is the story. It's the world that you're building. It's the fan base that you're building. And then it's a question of how do you maximize revenue for those fans and bring in new people. And so, you know, like I have, you know, the spin-off series like Rob has, you know, Snowpaw. I have Glarien, which is my more Game of Thronesy high fantasy version of White Ash. And that exists in a more not safe for work space, much like the show, you know, Game of Thrones does. So,
Right.
you know, on that campaign, it was the first time I experimented with content that was not safe for work. Now, it was intrinsic to the story. And so for me, it was important that it was justified and it wasn't something I was just doing. But that said, the campaign for Glarien blew up and was enormous. So, no, coming back to White Ash, the covers that I have here are, they're one or two are on the edge of like that one. Like if you look at that one,
this one is probably the most
it's
risque, right?
borderline, not safe for work. There may be some
Yeah,
things like I wanted to go
this one's pretty sexy. Yeah,
sexy with these
yeah,
covers, and push the boundaries of that, because like
yeah.
the White Ash audience was more of a PG-13 audience. When I go to the next Glarien campaign, I may lean even more into it. So I'm
Mm,
trying to walk the line between maximizing revenue but not losing the fan base, and make sure you're
right.
bringing in more people. And I think when you look at those campaigns that Mount Olympus have, or even like Lady Death,
Mhm.
um, the thing that always stands out to me is the amount per backer they're
Yeah,
bringing in. So, like you can always say, well, they brought in 3 times the number of people that you did, but yeah, but they brought in 20 times the amount of money. So I think that the question that all of us have to do once we start developing something that has a fan base that you can consistently come back to is, how do you maximize your per pledge average?
yeah.
Because that helps offset everything else. So like that's the mindset that I'm bringing to things now.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is I saw a comment from Daphne, who said, in the end, the publisher has to decide if they're selling comics or selling variant covers. I think there is some truth to that. Although at the same time, like, i- can you do both, right? And it seems like from a pure business standpoint, you know, as much as I hate to see it, unless you are in the rarefied air of, you know, James Tinian partnering up with one of the major studios, there's really no path to victory selling 4.99 comics, like a single version copy of a single 4.99 comic, um, unless it is at massive scale. And so, uh, in the indie space, one of the ways that you can do that is, and one of the ways that you can get your average customer to spend more on a Kickstarter is by offering them more. And one of the easiest ways to offer them more is to offer them different versions of the same story. But I'm just curious how, like, that decision, like, am I selling comics and selling a story versus am I selling just a bunch of copies of the same thing? Like, does that weigh on you, Rob, or at all, or is that something that you sort of wrestle with at all?
No, I think for me, it's like the amount of covers. I feel like I'm selling comics and the story, but the covers help me to do so. Because like you said, at 4.99, when I first started doing this with one issue, wasn't getting me anywhere. And then when I started experimenting with variant covers, that's when, like, I was starting to be able to cover costs and starting to make it, stand on its own. And I think for me, being able to do multiple covers to an extent. Like, I think the most I've done, I think this campaign is the most I've done so far. And I think I've done 8 this time, which probably is the most I'll probably ever do again if I, at that point. And then they're extremely limited too. So it's not like, I'm overblowing them. Um, but yeah, I think, to be able to do that is part of like how, I've been able to continue on the platform without having to continue to like hemorrhage my own personal funds into it, and for it to be able to stand on its own, and then to be able to do the spinoff, because otherwise, if I was still selling single issues at this point, I probably wouldn't be able to even be able to continue going on at that point.
Yeah. Um, Thoughts on variants, Charlie, and your approach?
Well, I think I think Daphne has a point. A publisher has to decide what they're trying to do. That said, these are different audiences. Like, and Tyler, you've experienced this in the direct market. You always have much bigger numbers for the first issue because you have all the speculators swooping in. And, I think speculators are a necessary evil because they help increase the print runs to the point where the comics can be, you can make enough revenue on them. So if you look at that for your Kickstarter, as long for me as I'm offering a tier when someone can just get the story and they can get a great cover and just read the story, that, I want that to be my biggest tier. That's the tier for the readers, for the fans of the series. That said, I want the other tiers there for the collectors who come in, for the people who are looking for something else, so I can make enough profit so then I can go back to Connor and say, hey, look, all that time you put in drawing, hey, Finn, we're going to bump up your page rate by a lot because we over raised all a bunch here. And so for me, it's just a business decision. My goal as a publisher is to sell the White Ash story. I have a lot of tales to tell, but I need to be able to afford to do it. So it's that balance.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And, and whether it be increasing the page rate for what they've already done, or, hey, we get to keep doing this, right? Like big launches mean, hey, we can make more. And so, finding ways to make that happen is definitely an important thing. I want to, something that, Lindsay from Oneshi Press in the comments said is, she said, I think it needs to work with your story and your audience. And she's sort of wondering, are your people asking for more risque stuff? And do they seem interested in the sexy stuff? And I'm wondering, like, Rob, you've been, with the wolf pack, you're pretty communicative with them. You ask them a lot, you survey them a lot, you make decisions with their input. I'm curious, did this cover that you're offering for the new White Ash that does it is the Lena Dye cover, was that something that you ran by your audience at all, or was this kind of a surprise?
Yeah, no, I asked, that was one of my last surveys that I did. I think it was after the Snowpaw campaign, when I was ramping up for this campaign, was, I ask a bunch of general questions kind of to get their feel about things, whether I should do like, an adult cover, or to do like a cosplay cover, or, trying to give them, a little bit of what they want. And this was hands down was like the highest. Like, I had three options. I had no, don't do it, your stuff's good enough by itself. The second was, yeah, I don't care either way. And then the third question or answer was to do the non-safe. And so it was like, and it wasn't even a contest. Like, the people who took that survey, it was that the clear winner was to do one. So here we are. I already had like the other covers all laid out and planned, and that's kind of how I ended up with more covers than I intended. Was because it was a majority that who took the survey wanted to have it, so I went ahead and did it. And for me, like the fact that they did, I was okay, that's fine. I'm going to do one, see how it does. Again, then we'd go into testing, because trying different things. And if it was like, failure, obviously I wouldn't do it again. If it was highly successful, I'll try it again. If it's kind of like in the middle, I'm still kind of like debating about doing it again myself. That said, it hasn't hurt me so far as like, I funded earlier and with more people than I even did with the Snowpaw campaign. But at this point, like, I think just going into it, the Snowpaw campaign kept on climbing faster. So I think until like yesterday, it was kind of like a little bit above Snowpaw. Now Snowpaw is kind of like, if I'm looking at the bar graphs in the dashboard, but I don't think that's necessarily apples to apples either. It could be, different things going on, different, with costs or whatever. Cause I've sold quite a bit of them, but they're not like the highest selling covers that I have either, But that said, I wouldn't do that with Snowpaw. That is something that I, because that series is more like, I want it to be more all ages and more fantasy based, and so I want her to be more of a wholesome character. I don't want her to be ever even in Nightwolf, I wouldn't represent her as one of these covers. It would be more, it's more the bad girls who are getting this kind of attention in the the Nightwolf series.
Yeah, got it. And I'm curious, like Charlie, as you moved your offering from the White Ash sort of PG-13-ish to the R for Glarien and some of the other stuff that you've done. Did you hear any backlash, or was it kind of all positive?
No, no. So far, it's been all positive. I think, like for me, I'm always trying to do it, trying to figure out the right way to explore more adult things.
Yeah.
One of the things that's important to me on at least the interiors in Glarien, and on another book that I did recently, was if you're working with a female artist or a female editor, as you approach that adult content, it helps mitigate any male gaze that might be inherent in my writing. And so for me, I'm trying to take a look at some of these things and not have it be exploitive, have it be more of an exploration. Um, so I approach it from that point of view. But you can also just sort of look and see what sells. And, obviously there's a certain amount of sexiness that sells. And, I've seen that in terms of which covers are the most popular. We have a cover right now with no shirt, but it's a guy with no shirt. And, that's not the most popular cover of the group. So, it's I think again, it's hand in hand. You're trying to figure out the right way to do these things, and the people to work with. Um, so I feel comfortable about what I've done because people keep coming back and they seem to love the content and the material. And I have a lot of people who've told me they like Glarien better than White Ash, which is interesting, and it's also a lot of women who have told me that. Some people like to lean into the high fantasy, and high fantasy sometimes is a little bit more mature. Um, did Rob drop off? One thing I was going to say. Oh, hey, Rob, you're back.
I got booted somehow. I don't know what happened. I got like the error thing, and I'm like, what happened?
I was going to say, like, in terms of tracking, I do think that, this is one thing that people should always remember. Every week on Kickstarter is different. And one of the biggest factors that I think changes how projects do that week on Kickstarter is what else launched. And this is a slower week on Kickstarter because nothing big that's rocketing up the charts has launched, bringing in a big fan base. So like my first week was way bigger than Glarien 2, and now this is a slower week for me. Next week we might have a bunch of big projects that come to the platform, and all of a sudden, like the overflow of backers will start, pumping things up again. So I think there are things that you can control, and there are things that you can't control on Kickstarter, and we have to do our best to do what we can with the things we can control.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's, as a veteran, I think there are a lot of creators out there that would hear you say that and scratch their heads and say, "Oh, wait, no, there weren't too many big Kickstarters that launched. Isn't that a good thing?" And the answer, when you have a top quality product, that potentially, no, it's not, because your product would probably be up there in what gets recommended to other creators that launch something cool of a similar genre. And that's that power of the Kickstarter recommendation engine, which is pretty great. I want to talk a little bit about just sausage getting made here. It sounds like Charlie, when you reach out to artists for your sort of more sexy covers, you mentioned really trying to often work with females creators and female artists to do it and to check that, or work with others to double check that. But like, I'm curious, Rob, for something like this Lena Dye cover, was it awkward to just reach, like, for you, like the first time reaching out is like, "Hey man, I want one of those sexy covers where you dress them up and then you take the clothes off"? How do you even ask for that thing? How did you know who to ask or what artists to go to? Our puritanical backgrounds, like, you don't want to get very slapped for, "How dare you ask me for something like that?"
Yeah,
so I'm curious, like the nuts and bolts of getting this cover done here.
So I've seen Lena's stuff done on Ron Z's campaigns, and in general, like even like the clothes style like that she does, I like her style of art in general. Like, and I've seen like a lot of the stuff that she's done for him, like in the Samurai of Oz, and I thought, okay, well, I like her style, and she does that the sexy covers too. So I approached Ron because I'm pretty sure she majority is like a full time for him. So I asked him. I said, hey, would you mind if I asked Lena to do a cover or two for me? And he's like, oh no, that'd be great. Thank you for asking. And I was like, oh cool, awesome. And he's like, yeah, here's her email address. So when I reached out to her through email, I said, hey, I'm a friend of Ron Z's, and he gave me your contact information. I'm looking to do my first non-safe cover work, for an upcoming campaign. And she's like, oh yeah, sure. Like didn't even bat an eye, like,
Yeah.
In her reply.
And like, I'm curious, like, and you don't have to reveal her page rates or everything, but I've like, one thing I was just curious is like, is there an extra charge for the two covers, or are they sort of treating it like, they're dolling it up in for the naked, and then they're just dressing it up with a filter on top, or another layer on top, and
Right.
like, did you have to negotiate for, hey, yes, I want two versions, or
Well, I was actually only going for one originally, but her charge was like, this is how much I charge you, get two versions. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that, again, that's another reason why I had so many extra covers. I'm like, oh well, it's included.
Yeah.
That's might as well.
Yeah, and that's one of those things, like, as someone who I'm a comic book collector, but I personally only need one copy of any book that I read in my own collection. It does baffle me that there is such a market for so many different versions and these.
Right.
But how did you come up with your price points and breakdowns for this? Because it looks like you've got 40 for the safe for work version, and 45 for the non-safe for work version, and then a discount, I guess, when you get them both.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so a lot of like how I do my covers is so I'll start with the standard, and then like that would be my multi-run, the larger print run, and then each each variant then gets like a lesser print run, so it goes down the pipe until there's less of them, and I bump the cost up $5 more each limited run. So that's kind of like how I do build out my tiers to kind of keep them like, separate, and to keep that price range. So for example, like, my second variant cover, I have like 600, and the next one below it has 500 printed, 400, 300, 200, 100, just as a kind of an example. So for seeing that I was testing this out, I wanted them to be the rarest covers that I have, because one, I don't know if I'm going to do it again. And if it didn't turn out to be badly, I didn't want to print a ton of them. You know what I mean? And if they did well, then, if they sold out, then obviously it was worth doing it. So at that point, it was kind of like a win-win having a low print run for it, regardless of what the outcome was. And so that's kind of like how they ended up being the top tiers of the singles. And then I figured, okay, well, if somebody is a completionist, or somebody who likes getting both versions, I give it a little bit of a discount to make it a little bit more enticing, and then they can get both virgin variants, if you will. And it had that actually, so there's been more of the combined, looking at the sales for that, just, the numbers, like I have like 10 backers for that $75 one, compared to 7 for just the non-safe, and then 1 for the safer version. So I mean, apparently more people want to have both of them. And then I also have like, the people who come and buy all of the variant covers, because I have a tier they can get all of them, which is this one right here.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of those as well. But yeah, so I mean, I think, having those options, for the true collectors, and the people who like that, just that style of art, it giving options, I think, is always a good way, because, and I think too, like, I may have turned off some of my, the people who didn't think that it was a good idea, but I also left it whereas like there wasn't like it wasn't plastered with it, so like I felt that they still had their safe options, or the good looking covers that didn't have any nudity,
Yeah.
the sexy ones or the action ones or the werewolf ones. I try to give a variety of covers that people can choose from that they enjoy, as well as just playing with that variety.
Yeah. Anything to add or anything different about your approach with pricing and variants, Charlie?
Well, I think, just, real quick, going back on the process of it, as Daphne said in the chat, if someone's doing not safe for work art already, they're going to be comfortable having that conversation with you. And I think sometimes when you're selecting an artist, you can select them by their portfolio and know what you're going to get. I have not asked for risque covers, but I've had artists deliver them to me. And then because that's what they wanted to draw. I had this one cover and I said, do you want to do something action based, something sensual? And they were like, something sensual. I was like, okay, well, you go for it. And then she came back with something and I actually said, oh, that's too much for me right now, And so I turned it into a safe for work cover. And then like, if you actually scroll down to the very bottom of that campaign, there's like a rare, not so safe for work variant. Like 2 years later, I was like, you know what? This is how the artist originally intended. You can see, so like, I was like, I'm going to offer that cover. But it's kind of near that, like, there you go. So like, I put a bathing suit on that cover right there when it was offered with the campaign. So now, but I also, at the time, I printed up 50 of them. So I figured if down the road I feel comfortable with this, I'll offer that up. But, so when you work with people who like drawing sexy material, that's what you're sometimes going to get. Romana, who does Glarien for me, with me, I think that's the best term, with me, she has a very sexy style and she loves drawing women. So I just say, do whatever you want with the cover. And that's what she comes back with. Specifically about pricing, I think Rob's right. I always think about my Kickstarter tiers as you want to upsell as you go down the page, right? So the deals get better the more expensive things get. But I always want to have a reader's tier, and then there's some deals for like some people who just want to dip their toe into collecting, and then you get the best deal when you get everything, but it's also the most expensive.
Absolutely. The other thing that has been sort of a discussion and I think there is a little bit of confusion around it, but in order to sell these covers or sell the risky sort of not safe for work material, there's a decision about how much of it to show on the Kickstarter page itself. While Kickstarter does have a prohibition against pornography, Kickstarter itself does not consider nudity or art of naked bodies pornography in and of itself. And so you could show a full reveal of that cover, Rob, on your Kickstarter page if you so chose. Or Charlie, you could show the for Glarien, the full like the pages where there is nudity on it in your previews. However, so there's a question of when you're going to offer this to censor or not to censor, and leave a little bit of the imagination. I see Rob has some. He's employing the naughty wolves. I don't even know what you call these, Rob.
Well,
I hope these are a sticker.
So it's funny, that is a voodoo doll version of Nightwolf from Sexy Pinup. that I had done for the my Twin Witches back in my volume 1 campaign, where they're like kind of wearing like lacy lingerie kind of a setup. So I was like, that kind of is a funny, because like his eyes are X'd out and he has his tongue out. I thought it was a funny thing to put on top of it. That way it wasn't completely like, for the people who might be turned off by it, I wanted to also cover it to kind of give them a safety net, if you will. I mean, obviously it's there, and if they're upset by it, I apologize. Though I tried to cover it so that it at least kind of minimize the damage, if you will.
Yeah.
But also I think too, like if you show everything, it makes it kind of is like, it's I think that for that, so if somebody wants to see the full out thing, when they buy it, it kind of gives them that incentive to buy it.
Yeah.
Plus, having that same artwork being shown all over Facebook is a no-no. So, in other social media platforms. So that's kind of like where I was just like, all right, well, I'm just going to cover it in the smart object that I'm using in every single thing that I'm doing. And, there's no reason to show it anywhere.
Yeah. Thoughts on that, Charlie?
Well, I think, Rob's right in that also, you don't want to offend people who come to the platform, who are not looking for that. You also don't want to give away the things that you're trying to sell. That said, like a quick funny story on Glarien, I was planning to put those on the interior pages, but as some of the creators know, when you set up a Kickstarter, sometimes you send a rougher version to Kickstarter to approve your project, right? So I sent a version that was not censored, even though I was planning to censor it. And I had a note saying, these will be censored when the project goes live. But they didn't seem to read that, because I got back one of those form letter rejections saying, your project has been flagged as pornography and we can't approve it. And I was like, that's not really what it is. And then I contacted them and it ended up getting the Project You Love badge when it was live. So it was a completely different experience.
Yeah.
But all that said, like it was, I think you want to make sure that what you're putting onto the internet is something that is comfortable for everyone. And those people who are looking to explore other things can explore those other things, but the people who don't want those things don't have to have those things.
Yeah. And for me, I do think there really are two draws, in addition to the story and everything else, for specifically that kind of material. There's the draw of I'm a collector, and then there's all the draw of, I gotta see everything, right? I need to complete that. And so, the same reason why, they put the old Playboy magazines in black bags at the, at your, corner shop. I think there is something to that on the Kickstarter platform as well. And that, perhaps if you just showed everything there, well, that itch for your prospective customer gets scratched, that it might not otherwise, if they gotta pay to see everything. Yeah. It's interesting stuff. So I'm curious. The other thing I'm curious, Rob, I know as conventions are coming back, have you given thought, given to the sort of, all ages nature of conventions and your other offerings, and having, the 8-year-old boy run up to the page and just start ripping through books and everything, how or if you'll display these those particular covers at conventions? Have you given any thought to that? You're going to print out some stickers of the thing and bag them?
That was something I had thought about, putting in a bag and board and just putting the stickers on top of those areas in the bag and board, and then not necessarily showing them outright. Like I have two retail racks that stack up, so you can kind of flip through. I would probably have the safe version on the rack. And if somebody's interested in it, I can say to them, hey, if you're also into the non-safe version, I have it back here, and then show them I think that's a safer way to do it, especially with my audience and being it and selling Snowpaw at the same time. Kind of giving that option, but still being say, hey, put it in their hands with the stickers over top of, in case there's anybody else around that, like underage, that shouldn't be seeing stuff like that.
Yeah, and Charlie, I'm not sure if you've gotten back into conventions since both White Ash and Glarien have come out, but have you had any issues sort of messaging who certain books are for and for?
Well, I mean, like,
audiences?
I think in general, my books being at least PG-13 anyway,
Yeah.
I'm always asking how old, if someone looks like they're in that teenage range when they come to the table, they are. So there's always that. But generally the people who come up to my table are older people. And so whatever they want to look into, I let them look into. I will say this one is more of an R-rated book. This is more of a PG-13 book. That's basically where I take those things. So.
Yeah, and I've had a few at cons come and ask about Nightwolf, and I'm like, there's no nudity in the book, but there are some, there's sexy girls that are drawn sexy, and there's a lot of like action and gore. There's blood and stuff, and the parents are like, oh yeah, blood's action's fine, blood and guts are fine. I'm like, okay, but I warned them ahead of time. I'm like, I would say, PG-13 is what Nightwolf is, but if you were to interested, that this is where we're at as far as like age wise, and they'll and I give it to them. I'm like, here, you look and you be the judge of what you think they should be able to see. Whereas like with Snowpaw, I won't have to have that issue. I could definitely say, I'm like, oh yeah, it's pretty much an all ages book. Maybe as far as like visuals, understanding wise, somebody with a, maybe like 10 could understand the reading a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, like I said, that's why another reason I would hide that cover at a con, just because there is that situation and I've gone through that already.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess
I actually have. Sorry, I got to jump, but I do want to say two things. One, that everyone should back Nightwolf, and if they do, there's actually a crossover print that if they backed White Ash, that they will also get. So on that, I thank you so much for having me. I got to run out to get the kids. So you guys have a great day, and again, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah,
thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us, Charlie. And yeah, I saw the really cool crossover print between White Ash and Nightwolf. So definitely take advantage of backing both Kickstarter campaigns and scoring a little extra something from. That's was that your creator partner from Nightwolf that did that, Rob?
Yeah, that's Carlos Herrera. He is the same cover. He did the cover for that as well. Yeah, if you want to scroll down to the bottom, we can talk about it. But yeah, it's basically when I found out that Charlie was running the same time, I was like, hey, you want to do a crossover? I would, especially being as a fan of his book. I was ecstatic when he said yes, and so I was like, Carlos, you got to do the best you can for this. And yeah, and it came out gorgeous. I mean, Lillian and it came out great. Nightwolf came out. The action of that crossover was just, it was great. It was gorgeous, and that's one of 3 that I'm doing this time. One that I'm doing with Travis, and then another with Daphne for her campaign as well.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, the crossover exclusives is a great way to just cross promote above and beyond what just sharing a link to another project. So love that. And yeah, cool one that Daphne did as well, right?
Oh yeah, Daphne's was like, and it was funny too because like she did a preamble to it, like one of her daily sketches, and I busted out laughing. It was just hilarious. But like, when I approached her, because her and I had done one before last year, and I was like, this time I wanted her character Loki kind of scuffling with Nightwolf. It was just for fun, and she loved the idea.
Nice. And there's the The White Ash Glarien.
Yes, that's the White Ash one. And it's Lillian and Nightwolf fighting off the monsters. And it came out like even the sketch that he did like initially after I told him, like a couple hours later, he came back with the sketch and it was like just spot on. Like, and I handed it over to Charlie to get his approval, and he's like, "That's gorgeous."
Yeah, he crushed it. Well, awesome, Rob. I mean, so early results on this. It seems like you've sold a few. It seems like it was a good working experience, working with Lena on that, and so far so good. Do you think this will be something that you'll continue to pursue in the future, or is this jury still out?
I think the jury's still out. Again, it's not hurting my campaign, but it's not like doing like head over heels either. So for me, like I'm always like I want the story to drive the fan base. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, it was just an experiment.
Well, someone from YouTube with the handle Master of Boobs says, "I vote yes," and he had a nice. I have actually never seen that emoticon combination.
I mean,
but, he nailed it. Thank you, Master of Boobs, for tuning in. And do we have a book for you?
So yeah, I mean, for me, I think again, again, the jury's still out. I think it's doing well. And what I'll do is I'll do another survey to my wolf pack and be like, hey, what did you think of this? Did you like it or not? Should I do it again? And kind of get their input. As always, I want to make sure that I'm giving them stuff that they would like, as well, along with the story that I'm putting out, for them to enjoy. So again, it's up in the air for Nightwolf if we're going to do it again. But again, for Snowpaw, that's not going to be a thing. And we're going to keep that one like the PG census as well.
Great. Well, awesome, Rob. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing this topic up and grabbing Charlie to join us for it. It was a great discussion, and I appreciate everyone tuning in for this one. And hopefully they at least got some questions to think about and a little bit more about the process and price points and everything. I think we covered a lot here. Anything you want to close out by saying or letting listeners know?
Yeah, I think too. A lot of like people ask like how I keep my campaign like rolling the way I do, and I think a lot of it is like I don't let up. I keep that pedal down and forward. So that, like that's just if you're out there and you're wondering, what just keep at it. Like some days are harder than others, but if you keep doing it, you keep inviting the guests, they'll come to the party.
Absolutely, and I see. I think you crossed over the $12,000 threshold while we've been broadcasting. So this is another example of keeping that drum beating. So we'll let you get back to it. And again, appreciate your time and your insight.
Thank you again for having me. And it was a pleasure talking with you and Charlie. Actually, I think that was the first time that I actually had a video chat with Charlie. Usually it's in like group chats and messages.
Comics launch, bringing creators together since 2016. Thanks so much, Rob. Appreciate you. And thanks everyone else for tuning in. We can't wait to see what you launch next. Take care.